Hello grade 7, this is Mrs. Lopez. Today we are learning lesson 13 in our module 2, um, um, uh, operations with rational numbers. And the lesson 13 is on converting between fractions and decimals using equivalent fractions. So first of all, we want to remember what decimals are. Decimals are numbers that have a decimal point, and every number after the decimal signifies a number out of 10, okay, or multiples of 10, rather. Also, decimals are fractions, just written in a different form. And today we need to learn how to convert them using equivalent fractions. So just let's complete the space value chart below, just to remember what it is. So this number is it's not a number, it's a decimal point. Decimal point. And usually in math, we would call it and all the time. When we talk about a number, a decimal number, we would say and. Okay. Number in the first place. I would even say, why don't we just put numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and every number has its value. Okay, so this is 3 and it's in the ones place. 2 is in the tens. 1 is in the hundreds. Okay, so we can say 3 and 4 tenths. This is tenths place. Tenths. I underline th because that's the difference between tens and tenths. For tenths, it's 4 out of 10. Okay, so when we make it a fraction, it will be 4 over 10, 4 tenths. 5 will be hundreds, and 6 will stand in place for thousands. So just so you remember, 5 in the hundreds place is 5 out of 100, right? 6 out of thousands. 7, 10 thousands. And 8 is in hundred thousands place. 100 thousands. Notice all of these have THS at the end. That shows you the difference between numbers and their fractional values. Okay, so using place value to write terminating decimals as equivalent fractions. So what is a terminating decimal? Let's talk about that. Terminating decimal is a decimal that ends, finishes. So when we have a number and it says 2 and 5 tenths, it's 2 and 5 tenths. There is nothing else coming from it after it. It's just 5, and after that we can put a 0, or we just know that there is nothing. That's a terminating decimal. What is the value of the number 2.5? So if we are looking at the chart, 2 is in the ones place, so we can say 2 and 5 tenths, right? 2 and 5 tenths. 2 and 5 tenths. Okay, so now we need to write it as a fraction or a mixed number. How do I write 2 and 5 tenths? 2 is a 2, and will be our fractional bar. 5 tenths, 5 out of 10, 2 and 5 tenths. That is the mixed number for 2 and 5 tenths. Okay, so 2.5 or 2 and 5 tenths equals 2 and 5 tenths. Simplify a fraction, part A. 2 and 5 tenths. I can divide that fraction, both parts of the fraction, by 5. And that will give me 2, and 5 divided by 5 is 1, 10 divided by 5 is 2, 2 and 1/2. Okay, moving on. What is the value of the number 2.25? So going back here in our chart, 2, and then we have a decimal. So 2 is in the ones place. 2 and 25, and 5 is in the place of hundreds, so 25 hundredths. 2 and 25 hundredths. 2 and 25 hundredths. Okay, how do I write it as a fraction or mixed number? 2, then we have and, then we have 25 hundredths, it's out of 100. 2 and 25 hundredths. So 2.25, 2 and 25 hundredths is 2 and 25 hundredths. So a decimal is a fraction, right? Okay, so let's simplify that fraction. 2 and 25 hundredths. We are looking for the number that 25 and 100 can be divisible by. That number, you can think of 5, or you can think of a higher number, let's say 25. Both numbers are divisible by 25. So that will be 2. 25 divided by 25 is 1. 100 divided by 25 is 4. So 2 and 1/4. Okay, these are equivalent fractions because they mean the same thing. So let's move on. Use place value to convert each terminating decimal to a fraction in simplest form. And sometimes you will not be able to divide. Sometimes the form that you write is going to be the form that there is. There will be no way to simplify. So let's see if we can find any of these. Probably not in these particular examples. Okay, so we have 0 and then we have a decimal point. So 0 and 218. 8 is in the third place after the decimal, so it means it's in the thousands place. So it's 218 thousandths. 218 thousandths. We can simplify this number. Because I see that both numbers are even numbers, it means they can be divisible by 2. So I can divide both numbers by 2. Okay, 218 divided by 2 is 109. And 1000 divided by 2 is 500. I don't think I can divide that number by anything else. So we are going to just stop here. We are going to just stop here and move on to the next one. 5 and 16, and 6 is in the hundreds place, so 16 hundredths. 5 and 16 hundredths. We can divide that number, both numbers are even again, so definitely can be divisible by 2, but I think that there is one more number that is higher. Both 16 and 100 can be divided by 4. 5 and 4/25. That will be your simplified fraction. Okay, 2 and 72. 2 is in the hundreds place, hundreds. 2 and 72 hundredths equals 2 and 72 hundredths. Let's divide both numbers by 2 because both numbers are even. So 2 and 36, and divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. 36 50ths. Okay, so I simplified, but I also see that these numbers can also be divisible by 2 because again, both of them are even. I'm going to divide again both numbers by 2. 2 and 18 25ths. Okay, so this is the simplified version. There is nothing else I can divide. Remember, if you divided and you see you still can divide, go ahead. There is nothing wrong with dividing by a smaller number and then dividing again, just like I did here. You can pick a higher number right away, or you can go smaller numbers and you will get there eventually too. Okay. All right, so here we have 5 after 3 zeros. 5 is in the fourth place. So we have tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. 5 10,000s. 5 out of or over 10,000. 5 10,000s. Both numbers are divisible by 5. So we are going to simplify that, and we will get 1 and 2,000. 1 2,000s. Okay, so that's how we convert decimals into fractions. We are just saying a number according to the place value using decimal, and then when we say it, we can see how we can write it as a fraction. Pretty simple. The hardest part here is to simplify it. Okay, now let's do the opposite. We are going to convert fractions to decimals. Okay, so what are the decimals? Decimals, or decimal number, is a number whose whole number part and the fractional part are separated by a decimal point. Whose whole number part and fractional part separated are separated by a decimal point. Okay. And the digital, so because digits following the decimal point, they show values that are smaller than 1. Those are fractional parts, right? Smaller than 1. Okay. And use the meaning of decimal to relate decimal place values. So decimals are based on preceding power of 10. Let's write it down. Decimals are based on preceding powers of 10. What does it mean? It means that from left to right, this value of digits gets divided by 10. From left to right, from left to right, the place value of digits, the place value of digits gets divided by 10. Okay, so for example, if I have so hundreds place, right? Hundreds, and then I have tens, just like in our chart, and then I have ones, and then I have a decimal point, and then I have tenths, hundreds, thousands. Okay, every preceding value gets divided by 10. So from hundreds to tens, this is divided by 10, right? From tens to ones, divide by 10. From ones to tens, again divide by 10. From tens to hundreds, again divide by 10. That's what's called preceding power of 10 divided by 10. Okay, so in every single case, from left to right, the value gets divided by 10. Okay, so now that we know that, we can write 300 as a decimal. If we are looking at 300s, we know that according to our chart, I can even look up here in our hundreds chart here, 300s, hundreds is the second space after the decimal. So 1, 2, hundreds is the second space. So 3 has to be right here in the second part after the space, after the period, after the decimal point. So 3 is in the second part after the decimal point. Then we have to have the first part, and then only we will have a decimal point. Okay, we don't have a whole number here. So when we put it up like that, we have to fill that blank space after the decimal, and that space will be filled up with 0. So 300 will be written as 0 decimal point 0 3 300. Okay, let's move on and practice some more. Write 3/20 as a decimal. Describe your process. Okay, so how do I write 3/20? Because 3/20 is not a power 20th, is not a power of 10. 20 is not a power of 10. Power of 10 are 10, 100, thousands, right? We have to have tenths or hundreds or thousands to be able to write it as a decimal. So what can I do to make it hundreds and thousands and tens? If I look at 20, I can see that I can multiply that 20 by 5 to make it 100, right? And if I multiply 20 by 5 to make it 100, I have to multiply 3 by 5 as well and make it 15. Now we have 1500. Okay, how do I write it as a decimal? 1500s, 5 has to be in the hundreds place. Otherwise, it's not gonna be hundreds. The terminating decimal, the terminating digit has to be in the hundreds place. So we will have decimal point and hundreds place. So hundreds place has only 2 values that we can put up here, and that is going to be our 15. 1 is in the tens place, 5 is in the hundreds place, and we don't have any whole numbers. Okay, that is our process for writing a decimal number out of a fraction 3/20. Okay, let's look at 10/25. We have 10/25. Again, I don't have a number, a place value that is 25ths. We have tens, hundreds, thousands. I can make 100 out of 25. I need to multiply 25 by 4 to make 100. And if I multiply 25 by 4, I have to multiply 10 by 4. Otherwise, it's not going to be the same fraction. And 10 times 4 is 40. 40 hundredths. How do I write 40 hundredths? I have to have a decimal place, and hundredths means that I have to have 2 places after the decimal. Okay? And I need to put my 40 within those places. So I'm going to put 40 right here. 40 hundredths. And there is a 0 whole numbers. Okay? Let's take a look at 1/2. 1/2, we need to write it as a decimal. 1/2. 2 is not in the place value in the decimals, but 10 is, so I can turn 2 into 10. I multiply 2 by 5 to make it a 10. And since I multiplied 2 by 5, I also need to multiply 1 by 5. 1 times 5 is 5. I get 5 tenths. Okay, now I need to put a plus decimal point, and tenths is in the first place after the decimal, right here. So that's where I put my 5, and I have 0 whole numbers. Let's take a look at 7/5 of the decimal. 7/5. Okay, so let's take a look at this fraction. This is an improper fraction. It means that we have more than one whole here. 5/5 is a whole. 7/5 can be written as 5/5 plus 2/5, isn't it? 5/5 plus 2/5 is 7/5. 5/5 is my one whole, so it's right here, one whole. So that is 1 and 2/5, isn't it? Okay. Now that mixed number I can change into a decimal because, well, first of all, I need to convert it into a fraction that has tens or hundreds or thousands in the denominator, right? So 1 and 2/5, I need to make tens. I need to multiply 5 by 2 to make tens. And since I multiplied 5 by 2, I can also multiply 2 by 2. Okay, so I will have 1 and 4 tenths. Okay, now this is a mixed number. That means I will have a whole number, right? I will have 1 and then I will have 4 tenths. Tenths is in the first place after the decimal. So only thing I need to do is to put 4 in. 1 and 4 tenths. Okay? That's how we change fractions into decimals and decimals into fractions. And again, we are talking only about terminating decimals, and that is pretty easy to do. Make sure you know how to make equivalent fractions. And we learned that in our module 1 too. Okay? Points to remember. Any terminating decimal can be converted to a fraction using place value. Okay, we just learned it. We know we can convert any single terminating decimal into a fraction. A fraction whose denominator includes only factors of 2 and 5 can be converted to a decimal by writing the denominator as a power of 10. Okay, that we didn't cover, but we can see that every terminating fraction can be converted to a decimal, but that fraction has to have a factor of 2 and 5. Otherwise, it might not work. Okay, that is for you to remember. Please do your homework. If you have any further questions, please message me. Otherwise, I will see you in class.